So before I start my notes, what should I have at the top of them? The date. What is today? September 4th. And then I should probably have a title. So let's start with this particular absolute value equation. Okay? I know there's something in here right now. We're going to ignore it for just a second. What can I take the absolute value of that will give me an answer of 6? Negative 6 or 6, right? Wait, 2 possibilities? That's important. That's really important. Okay? I know you already know that, but I need to make it important for what we're doing today. Okay? So now we look at what's actually inside the absolute value, and we say, what did we say this is allowed to be? Negative or positive, right? So if it's positive, it's just exactly like it was when it was in there. If it's negative, how do I do that? Negative of everything that was just in there. Does that make sense? Now, guys, I have to be honest with you. If you look at the examples in your textbook, they change this sign. They make this x plus 4 equals 6, x plus 4 equals negative 6. Do you understand how they might say that? Hopefully, yes. Okay? I'm here to tell you that I am thinking ahead. I know what comes next in the lessons that I'm teaching. Okay? And because I know what comes next in the lessons I'm teaching, I'm going to teach you how to do it this way. So if you look in the book for help, it's going to show you a different way. I just need you to be prepared for that. Okay? I can't tell you why this makes more sense right now. I need you to trust me for a couple days until we get to our next thing. And when we get to our next thing, this is going to make it way easier what we're doing next. It's like, do I just keep on doing the same thing I was doing before, or do I memorize a whole bunch of new rules? I don't want to memorize a whole bunch of new rules. Okay? I want to do it this way when we solve equations, and then when we get to the next thing, I'm just going to keep doing this way, and it'll be fine. Can you trust me on this one? Okay, so let's go back to the first equation. So first of all, I have my absolute value equation. I separated it into 2 parts, right? The positive part and then the negative part. Are you all right with that? Now let's look at just this side. I'm ignoring the second one. I'm just looking just at this side. Okay? How do I solve this equation? Subtract 4 from both sides. That's pretty easy, right? X equals what? 2. Is it right? How do you know? You could prove it, right? 2 plus 4 is 6. What's the absolute value of 6? Does 6 equal 6? So then I know that this is the right answer, right? And in fact, I checked it. When I check it in my head, I literally write down a check that tells me that I've already checked it. Literally and figuratively, right? Okay? How do you think we ought to go about solving this one? I could distribute. Yeah, I sure could do that. If I distribute the negative 1 to each one of those terms, what do I get? Negative x minus 4 equals 6. So what do I do first? Add 4. Negative x equals 10. Is that it? What do I do now? Divide by a negative 1. Now, earlier somebody said, and I think I just heard it now, I need to fix that. Do I divide by a negative x? If I divide by negative x, I've gotten rid of x on this side, and what I'm trying to do is isolate the x, right? So, instead of dividing by negative x, I just want to divide by the negative 1. Does everybody understand that? Okay, so what do I have left on the left-hand side right here? X, and what do I have left on the right-hand side? Negative 10. Okay, what is negative 10 plus 4? Negative 6. What's the absolute value of negative 6? 6. Does 6 equal 6? Then this is, wait, Which one of these is right? Wait, so if I have an absolute value equation, should I get two answers? Every time? Almost every time? Almost every time. There will be a time that you only get one answer, but I'll show you an example of that and you'll understand why. At least I hope you will understand why. Okay? But almost every single time I do absolute value equations, I should get two answers. Got it? Because I put them both in and they both worked, didn't they? So they both have to be answers and that has to be okay. You alright so far? Okay. Let me use a different color. What should I do first? Why do you want to subtract 4 first? Why can't you just write this into two parts like we did a second ago? We can only do that when the absolute value is isolated. Okay? So yes, absolutely we have to subtract 4 first. That gives us absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals 6. I'm sorry I made the same answer as the first example. I didn't mean to do that. Okay? What? It is kind of my fault. But that's okay. I appreciate the sentiment. What do I do now? Now do I divide both sides by 2? Or add 3? Once the absolute value was isolated, get your two parts. Positive part and negative part. Okay? What's my positive part look like? 2x minus 3 equals 6. It's okay. What's my negative part look like? Negative parenthesis equals 6, right? Now I'm going to, well, let's solve the first part and then I'll tell you what I'm going to do. How do I solve the first part? Add 3, 2x equals 9, divide both sides by 2, x equals 9 over 2. Don't try to make it harder than it is. And it's not hard, it's just a fraction. It's just a fraction. Okay? What about this side? Before you start, I'm going to ask you to do it a different way than we did the first example. Okay? What if I got rid of the negative sign first? Am I allowed to do that? What if I divided by a negative 1 first? What happens on the left-hand side? Negative divided by a negative is a positive, so I just have 2x minus 3. What happens on the right-hand side? Negative 6. Now what? Add 3. 2x equals negative 3. Dividing by 2 gives me x equals negative 3 has. Am I right? How do you know? How could you know for sure? I could plug it in, right? 9 halves. 9 halves times 2 is 9. 9 minus 3 is 6. What's the absolute value of 6? What's 6 plus 4? Does 10 equal 10? Then this is right, without a doubt. What about negative 3 halves? Negative 3 halves times 2 is negative 3. Negative 3 minus 3? Negative 6. Absolute value of negative 6? 6 plus 4? Does 10 equal 10? Then this is also right. Now, I'm going to add another step to this problem. Mostly I'm going to add a step to this problem because I forgot to do it in the first problem. We'll go back in a second and do it. Okay? This is another one of those things that's just like whatever right now, but eventually it's going to be really good that we started with it. Okay? I need to represent my answer on a number line. Where's 0 go? Oh, the middle is fine. Where does 9/2 go? To the right for it's positive, right? 9/2 is 4.5. So let's just say 9/2 is right there. Where does -3/2 go? To the left because it's negative. Well, if this is 4.5, this is -1.5, so it ought to be like maybe right there, right? I'm not asking you to measure it out. I'm asking you to make a good guess, a good estimation of where it should be. Is that fair? Okay. So if my answer is 9/2, what do I put at 9/2? A dot. If my answer is -3/2, what do I put at -3/2? A dot. Done. Can we go back to the first example and do that? Okay. If this is my number line, and here's 0, 2 would be right here if 10 also has to go, right? -10. So a dot on -10 and a dot on 2. Yes. For now, for this stuff, it's always a dot, yes. Okay. Any questions about this so far? Yes, ma'am. Yes. For now, yes. Okay. Any questions so far? Besides the two that you just asked, which were great questions. Okay. All right. So remember how I told you you'll almost always have two answers? Can I show you when you won't? Okay. I mean, I don't have to. I could just let you figure it out on your own if you'd rather that. Okay. Absolute value of 2x plus 5 plus 7 equals 7. What do I do first? Subtract 7 from both sides. Absolute value of 2x plus 5 equals 0. Is my absolute value isolated? Yes, so two parts, a positive part and a negative part. Positive part looks like 2x plus 5 equals 0. And what's the negative part look like? Right? What's wrong? Okay, so far? I wrote the positive part, I wrote the negative part, right? Okay, so how are we going to solve this side? Subtract 5, okay. 2x equals -5. If I divide both sides by 2, I get x equals -5 halves. Let's distribute this time. -2x minus 5 equals 0. You want to add 5? Okay, I can do that. -2x equals 5. Divide by -2. Why is it the same thing? When I take the absolute value of something, if it equals 0, that would imply that what's inside here is either a positive 0 or a negative 0. And there's really not that, is there? Okay? So technically, did I get two answers? Yes, but they are the same. How do I write it on the number line? If this is 0, where's -5/2? To the left. I suppose I could put two dots like you suggested. There's the first one. There's the second one. Nope, just like this. Don't judge my dots. You don't need to say fat dot. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. So this also brings forth another question that I've been asked already this morning, which is a very good question, But we got to talk about it because I need it to be very clear to you.
Miss Kingston,
Yes, ma'am.
can I have reimbursement when you guys are at a stopping point?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I got two answers, right? One's positive, one's negative, right? I got two answers. One's positive, one's negative. Do I always have to get two answers, one that's positive, one that's negative? I didn't right here, did I? I only got one answer. Could I get two answers and they're both negative? Could I get two answers that are both positive? Yeah, it just depends on what solves this equation, doesn't it? Okay, so I just need you to be aware of that. I do want to show you one more. Do you want me to make it as hard as I possibly can? Okay, here we go. Can I change one thing before we get started? I just forgot a sign. I just forgot a sign. You asked me to make it as hard as I possibly could, so I worked on it. Goodness. Oh, so you're lying. Oh, okay. Okay, what should we do first? I need to isolate the absolute value. So in order to isolate the absolute value, I want to add 4. Okay? I want to add 4 to both sides. When I add 4 to both sides, I end up with negative 1/2. Yes. Equals 12. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Do I ever divide by fractions? No. What do I do instead? Multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm not going to divide by negative 1/2. I'm going to multiply by negative 2. I said I'm going to multiply by negative 2. We don't like to divide by fractions, okay? And in fact, a lot of times that makes it harder on our brain to figure out what's happening. Dividing and multiplying by reciprocals are the same thing. So if I already have a fraction, I don't want to try to divide by that fraction that's multiplying. I want to multiply by its reciprocal instead. Because negative 2 times negative 1/2 is still positive 1, isn't it? And that's what I needed that to do. I needed that to go away. We'll go with that, yes. 3x plus 7 equals? So I want you to know that we're done with this problem. I want to ask you a question. We have isolated the absolute value, haven't we? You tell me what number can I put in here for x that when I take the absolute value of it, I will get an answer that's negative. What number can be inside of this absolute value right here that when I take the absolute value of it, I will get a negative answer? I need to show you how to graph that on the number line. There you go. Somebody tell me in their own words why this is no solution. You start. I'll give everybody else a chance. I want you to start. It's not going to work out. What do you want to say? If I try to make this a negative number, it's still going to come out of the absolute value sign as a positive. Good point. Who else? Who else has something to add? Somebody ask me a question. Why can't you divide by fractions? You can, it's messy. And a lot of times it messes with your brain. Because typically when you divide something, it goes into smaller parts, right? But dividing by a fraction, you notice if I was to divide by negative 1/2 here, going from 12 to 24, it doesn't look like it's going smaller. It looks like it's going bigger, right? So we just typically don't in upper level mathematics classes because it can get confusing. Okay, good question. Anybody else have one? We good? Okay, yes ma'am. Is it always going to be no solution when it equals a negative? That is a very good question, and I need you to answer it. If, what's true? If the absolute value is isolated. Okay? Don't automatically look over here and see a negative and write no solution. Because it might say absolute value of 3x plus 7 minus 30 equals negative 24. And if that's what happens and I add 30, that's not negative over here, is it anymore? So isolate your absolute value. Once your absolute value is isolated, if then it equals a negative, then what? Then no solution. Any questions? Got it?